Gal Pals, video games and Greek mythology. A winning combination. Hi, I'm Claire and you're watching Just Gal Pals, a channel all about arms and armour intersecting with various bits of women's histories, gender feelings and just overall weird connections, because I like that kind of stuff and I want people to like it too. This is pure propaganda. Sometimes I talk about source, sometimes I talk about media, and sometimes I talk about video games. This video is part of a new series I'm doing called Arms and Arcades that is all about, you guessed it, arms and armour within video games. And this is part 2 of a mini-series I'm doing all around historical and mythological inspirations around arms and armour in the video game Hades, one of my favourite current video games. For a bit more context and my thoughts on the game, I would recommend starting with episode 1, unless you're, really special and you just want to start with episode 2 and watch episode 1. I'm not your mum, so I can't tell you what to do. But to roughly summarise, great game, beautiful stories and visuals, incredible LGBTQIA representation, really kind of non-confrontational, non-kind of homophobic and transphobic, just, a story where people happen to be queer and it's awesome, but also, very importantly, great fighting mechanics and beautiful arms and armour design, which I love. So in the first video, we covered the inspiration behind Varatha, the Eternal Spear, which is more specifically a bident, which, yes, if you're wondering, made my Googling for research for that video very difficult. Thanks, American politics. But in this video, let's have a closer look at something that's called the Aegis, and in the game is specifically called Aegis, the Shield of Chaos. We love a little bit of chaos, don't we? But what is it inspired from? Well, it's got a warrior woman connection, and I can't just gloss over that, because warrior women are my entire personality, so buckle up. It's about to get feminist and gay. Well, sort of. You'll see. Because in the game, we don't just interact with Zeus, ruler of Olympus and god of thunder and problematic sky dad, we also interact with one of my problematic faves in Greek mythology, Athena, goddess of war and wisdom. Which I was very excited about because in terms of contemporary adaptations of Greek mythology, Athena isn't in those as often as she should be, in my opinion. Of course I'm going to say that because I love warrior women, but still. Athena often gets skipped over in favour of just having Ares, the other god of war. He's the god of courage and war, and Athena basically represents the more strategic, reasoned side of war, if there can be a reasoned side of war. But you know what I mean, more kind of strategy in trying to prevent war when you can, and is also associated with the idea of peace. So more the kind of defensive side, I guess. While Ares is your more kind of edgy, blood-frenzied god, who's all about chasing glory in battle, which is very characterised for both of them in the game, but often when it comes to media representations, people kind of go, alright, well, we just need one god of war, so let's go with a more kind of typical war deity, I guess. But let's focus on Athena, the girl boss of Mount Olympus. Do I need to define what a girl boss is? Let's go. A girl boss, especially in the 2020s, has very specific connotations. It was initially more of a kind of term for a powerful woman, usually in a very kind of male-dominated environment, but it's also come to define more closely a woman who is pretty much kind of powerful in ways that are often seen as not necessarily positive, as in a woman who will be really successful but put down other women in doing so and not necessarily be a feminist icon. And this corresponds to Athena in more ways than one, because she's definitely the blueprint for the idea of the powerful warrior woman in the European canon, in good and in bad ways. On one hand, she definitely portrays poise and strength, and she's shown as a skilled warrior and strategic thinker. She wields a spear in battle and is shown as the voice that guides some of Greek mythology's most iconic heroes like Odysseus. More than that, she's also associated with peace, but also things like handcrafting, like weaving or spinning. She was born from the head of her father Zeus after he devoured her mother, Metis, the goddess of wisdom, as a way of preventing Athena from being born because he was scared that she would become better than him. And Athena was like, joke's on you, I'm coming out of your head. So that's nice. Greek mythology is really weird. She's also a virgin who constantly rejects any romantic or sexual advances from men. You know what that means. Gal pals alerts. Gal pals alerts. I'm not saying that Athena was instead attracted or, you know, at least romantically interested in women, but I'm not saying that. It's open to interpretation. Because if we don't open it to interpretation, all of the European canon just goes, well, I guess they were straight, because we're not going to open this up to any interpretation outside of the evidence that we have. And that's how you end up with queer erasure throughout history. So, yay! Let's open stuff up to interpretation, otherwise we just practically don't have any queer history because it's been constantly censored by straight men. Where was I? So yes, it is open to interpretation, and I think there's a lot to explore in terms of goddesses who could definitely be coded both as aromantic and or asexual, but also as queer, because there's a lot around only defining lack of attraction as being lack of attraction to men, but not really much being said about relationships between women either way. In the Homeric hymn, we have this statement about Athena. She takes no pleasure in the things done by golden Aphrodite. Aphrodite being the goddess of love. Aphrodite, 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 the goddess of love. Am I going to get sued by Disney for that? Or is the TV series Hercules too niche? We'll find out if I include this clip. But to me there's a slightly bigger hurdle to the idea of Athena being interpreted as sapphic, which can be best shown by one of the rare stories surrounding Athena that we could interpret as a little bit gay. Athena is really, let's say, fond of this human maiden. Her name is Myrmex, and she is beloved by the goddess. You know, goddess is really into Myrmex. Okay, yeah. But then Myrmex really screws up. She says, oh hey everyone, turns out I invented the plough. I know, just a very weird ancient Greece flex, but whatever. But Athena is outraged, betrayed, because you see, she invented the plough. Drama. And Athena felt that for that, she deserved to be applauded. So she reacts completely normally to Myrmex's claim of her invention. And she transforms her into an ant. Yeah, an ant. Didn't see that one coming? Yeah, me neither. I mean, yes, it's incredibly silly thing to claim that you invented something, especially when the actual inventor is an all-powerful goddess, but, you know, is it worse as punishment? You can really say that Athena comes off as a little antagonistic. So that's the flip side of it. On one hand, Athena is a skillful, heroic figure, a powerful woman. On the other hand, she falls into the trap of being shown as exceptional compared to other women around her, whether they are other goddesses or mortals, further reinforcing the sexist point that women who were good at fighting were somehow outliers, like exceptional compared to their gender in general, due to innate skill that kind of made that they were above other women, and not due to patriarchal structures in place that would have prevented most other women from achieving that kind of success and that kind of fighting skill. I think she's a really interesting figure, but she definitely has that not like other girls vibe about her. Not only preferring the company of men, but not really standing for women and often harming them for honestly quite petty reasons. So we've seen it with Antgate, with Myrmex, but we've also seen it in other stories like the story of Arachne. There's this woman called Arachne who is very, very good at spinning, and she ultimately shows that she is even more skilled at spinning than the goddess Athena, who just throws a fit and subsequently changes Arachne into a spider, which is why spiders are so good at weaving cobwebs. Yeah. Athena just has an obsession with changing women into insects. It's kind of creepy. I also find this all really interesting when we compare this to the real life city that she was a patron of, Athens. Often there's this presentation of Athens as a more democratic and more civilized and peaceful city in comparison to the warrior city of Sparta, which raises its children in very rough conditions to prepare them for battle. But ironically, Greek democracy would have excluded women from taking part in most decisions, and Athens in particular was very misogynistic by our modern standards. While Sparta, while not exactly the most feminist place on earth, this is still ancient Greek and it's overall a patriarchal and misogynistic society, had more in place to allow women that have more freedom and independence than other places in Greece at the time, from what we've been able to gather from sources. Not necessarily in the military, but certainly in terms of education and property ownership. But there are also very little remaining sources and not enough for us to determine a unique situation there. So Athena looks like a pretty girl power goddess, but like most historical and mythological women throughout history, she also has her flaws, which is why I find her so interesting. In the game, she's definitely shown as wise and intelligent, if not a little uptight, and she also knows how to use her weapons sparingly, or advise Zagreus on how to use them. And one of those weapons that Zagreus uses in the video game is Aegis, or Shield of Chaos. In the game, it's exactly what it says on the tin, a big old shield, that is used not so much for only defense, but also offense. Used to swing at enemies, bash them, and block damage. And a special move also has a shield bouncing around among various enemies before returning to its owner. It's basically a big boomerang. And this is some of the game lore around it. Aegis, the Shield of Chaos, predecessor to the very Aegis wielded by Lord Zeus and by Athena, his most favoured daughter. The Lord of Thunder defended his brothers and sisters using that very shield when, together, they conspired to drive the Titans back into the lowest reaches of the underworld. So the Aegis is owned by Zeus and Athena. Spoiler alert! Not really, I mean, the lore's been around for thousands of years. But yes, in the original myth, there is indeed some dual ownership going on. The Aegis is a weapon that is carried by both Athena and a problematic sky dad himself, Zeus. And the thing is, we assume the thing is a shield based on some interpretations, but it can also be interpreted as some kind of animal skin. And whatever this thing is, it's certainly something. Here's an extract about it from the Iliad. It produced a sound as from a myriad roaring dragons, and was born by Athena in battle. And among them went bright-eyed Athene, holding the precious Aegis, which is ageless and immortal. 100 tassels of pure gold hang fluttering from it, tight woven each of them, and each the worth of 100 oxen. So it's very ornate, it's very loud, it's got 100 tassels of gold. I mean, Athena invented the plough, but also the concept of camp. Virgil also describes the Aegis like this. The Aegis Athena wears in her angry moods, a fearsome thing, with a surface of gold, like scaly snakeskin, and the linked serpents, and the Gorgon herself upon the goddess's breast, a severed head rolling its eyes. A cool, fun, trendy accessory for your next battle. So while a lot of descriptions of the Aegis may vary, that one is a constant, a big old Medusa's head on there. The Medusa is a Gorgon, a monster with snakes instead of hair, who with one gaze can turn someone into stone. Medusa is beheaded by the hero Perseus, who offers up her head to Athena after he used the mirrored shield that Athena had gifted to him to defeat her. To defeat Medusa, that is, not to defeat Athena. In the version of the myth by Ovid, or Ovid, I have not checked, and the Latinists will surely be upon me, Athena is also the very same person who punished Medusa to take on this form after considering that Poseidon and Medusa had both disrespected the sanctity of her temple, with the blame falling not on the all-powerful god Poseidon, but on Medusa. I'd rather give people a choice around going to look at these different interpretations of the root cause of Medusa's punishment, and at least how it is interpreted today, because there are a variety of trigger warnings involved around consent or non-consent that is involved. In either version, however, Athena does not come off as a feminist icon. That's the least you can say. And as we know, this isn't the first time that she's thrown other women under the bus. Arachne, Myrmex, Medusa, ants, spiders, snakes. It's a lot. Additionally, the game Hades actually does have a Medusa, or Deusa for short, who does appear as just a disembodied head, so a little nod to the original myth. Interestingly, Athena in game does not have a Gorgon's head on her shield, maybe it makes things really awkward, but she does have a sculpture of one on her armour. And this detail of the serpent-headed Gorgon being on the Aegis might give some clue as to the whole tassel situation, or fringes that are described as being on the Aegis, perhaps standing in for the movement and appearance of a multitude of snakes, which would explain this whole situation, this whole fashion moment. Camp snake tassel fashion. But there's one last connection between the Aegis and Athena, and that is the story of Pallas and Athena. And once again, it's kind of gay, but also kind of unfortunate. According to some lore, Athena is raised alongside a daughter of Triton, not that Triton, who is called Pallas. They both learn to fight and are very close. Super close, like sisters or bosom friends or girls being pals. Anyway, don't get too excited because there's a festival in which Pallas and Athena fight in a mock battle with spears, as you do with your extremely close sister, bosom friend, gal with whom you're pal. But Zeus, who is attending, is scared of his daughter losing the battle because he's literally the worst dad in existence. So he distracts Pallas from the battle with the Aegis. I don't know if he's shaking it around, what he's doing with it, just shaking the tassels, but he's distracting her. And Athena, not expecting Pallas to be distracted at that crucial moment, accidentally impales her. Yeah. I mean, this time Athena does express regret. So much so, in fact, that she takes on Pallas's name to always be able to honour her wherever she goes. And thus, her full name is actually Pallas Athena, because it's perfectly normal and totally not gay to do that kind of thing. And this shows us that despite Athena's many flaws, the worst god is still definitely Zeus. As final thoughts in this video, which is essentially a big cautionary tale about girl-bossifying Athena too much, I find it really interesting that the Aegis has always such a prominent role to play in terms of imagery and stories surrounding Athena, who is often also depicted with a spear, but that always features a little less prominently. Whatever the Aegis is always portrayed as just as powerful as any bladed or pointy weapon, and in the game it is used to emphasize that Athena is not only a goddess of war, but also a wise goddess of war, who prefers to employ strategy over brute strength, which also includes defense and protection. And I'm honestly just really happy that the game Hades included her in the first place, despite her canonical issues. She's often a secondary or even background character in most modern adaptations, and I feel that's also maybe because she's a little bit hard to present as an archetype. She's wise, but she's also petty as hell. She's a fighter, but she's also a patron of the arts. Her personality is just kind of slippery like that. But I think that's overall more interesting than having a one-tone interpretation of a character. An added note is that I think that it's great that the game interpreted Athena as being black, and it's probably a statement around the fact that the gods of the Greek pantheon were inspired and adopted quite often from a range of cultures outside Greece. And this is better elaborated on via this quote by Greg Kasavin. As we discussed and researched the Olympians from canon sources, something stood out that in retrospect was obvious. They're called the Greek gods because they were worshipped in ancient Greece, not because they themselves are ethnically Greek. It's refreshing to see new perspectives that can challenge the status quo and go further in breaking down the flawed idea of all-encompassing whiteness in a classical canon. It goes hand in hand for me with the idea of the game presenting a different interpretation than the usual one we are accustomed to. Just like we can interpret what the Aegis was in a range of ways, with or without tassels. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like, comment and subscribe to support the channel. You can follow me on my social media for more warrior women and swords and general nerding out about arms and armour. You can listen to my podcast, Bustles and Broadswords, all about women with swords throughout history, and you can also read my webcomic, Girls' School of Knighthood. Stay safe, sword lovers, and see you in another video.